Welcome back, folks. For those of you that tuned in for the Wave 3 releases just not that long ago, a couple hours ago, this is basically just a continuation of Renegade's Renegade Con today. So it's basically just looking at the designer roundtable, talking to the designers. I think it's going to be kind of an open chat. We'll see what that looks like. I'm really curious to see kind of what the format's going to be like in terms of if they're going to be just having a standard, session where they have prepared answers and stuff, or if they're going to be doing kind of an open mic, so to speak, for questions. So we will see. But on the screen, I've added the image that from the announcement for bundling. So some of the stuff that was announced today won't go out till February. Well, that's the next wave is February, but some of it's not going out till April. So when you're buying your stuff, just make sure that is in the back of your mind, because if you buy stuff from both groups, both April and February, they won't ship it to you until the April stuff has been released, and you want to avoid that. So if you're pre-ordering your stuff, pre-order the bundled, let's see, let's move that. Yeah, pre-order the bundled stuff together. Yeah, let's move that down this way. There we go. I'm just adding my affiliate links here for those of you that are curious. There we go. That looks a little bit cleaner. Cool. So they should be doing the designer roundtable here in just a few minutes. They said they're running a few minutes late, it looks like. How are you doing about the Rising Tide reveals? Okay, it looks like, on the chat there, it looks like they're just running a few minutes late. Cool. Okay, sweet. Well, we'll get started here in a few minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know or ask me anything that's on your mind. I'm really excited about this. Also, I'll chat in here. Say hi when you join. There we go. Yeah, so Wave 3 I think is going to be super, super cool. There's a lot of really cool stuff to get excited about. Major Q11 did not expect that. We had not seen this card at all. Same with Sonlin. So getting to see two big reveals like that was really cool. I think both of those units are going to be... Oh, excuse me. I don't know where that yawn came from. Both of those units are going to be really, really awesome. When I'm looking at the list of release stuff for Knight Primus, the Hellforged Manticore, I think those are really, really cool. The paint set honestly surprised me a lot. They did not reveal that at all, and that's just gonna be really cool. Okay, here we go. We've got a 2 minute countdown. So that really surprised me that they did a army painter paint set. Like, I mean, I guess I'm not terribly surprised because that was something I talked to him about at Gen Con. That's something that a bunch of us, when we were talking to Scott Gata, the CEO, and others, we just mentioned that. So I'm not terribly surprised. I'm sure they were already probably in conversations with Army Painter about that, but still, really cool offering to be able to be like, hey, you want to paint your Heroscape, and you're still figuring out how to paint, but you don't know what paints you need, blah, 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 right? Boom. Here's a $90 Heroscape specific Army Painter box. Now, granted, if you don't like the Heroscape paint job, obviously you can just get your own paints and do your own, or you can use the Heroscape paint set, but just paint it differently than the what's the promoted, I guess, or the Paint Masters, I guess. But anyway, so we're gonna get started here in 40 seconds. Again, I don't really know what to expect here. I think there's a couple ways this could go. It could be just a canned conversation that is kind of like pre-recorded and just between question and answer with the designers, or it could be an open mic, right, where they say, hey, here's a couple cool things about design work, about Heroscape, and they share, 10-15 minutes, and they let the rest of it be an open Q&A. I think that would be really cool with an open Q&A, but you always run a risk with a live chat online. So we'll see what they decide, yeah, see what happens here as we get started. Okay.
I think we're finally here. Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Sorry for the delay, everyone. There was a lot to talk about earlier. So, hello and welcome to the Heroscape Designer Roundtable. I'm Leah, Associate Producer for Heroscape. Today, I'm joined by our incredible development team, and actually we'll introduce them shortly. We'll be diving into game design and exploring what makes the dice roll in Heroscape. We'll try to take some questions from the chat if we have time, so feel free to send them in, and I will do my best to include them.
Okay.
So let's get started. We'll start with introductions. Alex, would you mind kicking us off by telling everyone a bit about yourself and your experience with other games you've worked on?
Sure, I'll keep it to a bit, because otherwise this list will get very long, but I started out my career in the game world at Fantasy Flight Games all the way back in 2011. And I was fortunate enough to work on both editions of X-Wing, Star Wars Armada, and then design Star Wars Legion. I followed that up with a little brief stint at WizKids, working on a variety of games over there, and now I am here on Valhalla, clearly, reporting live from Revna's Secret Cavern and working on Heroscape.
Well, it's awesome to have you here. I mean, X-Wing and Star Wars in general are personal favorites of mine. They hold a special spot in my heart. So I'm thrilled to have you part of our Heroscape fam. So thank you, Alex. Next up,
Happy to be here.
Ron, could you share a little bit about your background and the games you've been involved with?
Absolutely. No.
Oh.
Some of you might know me, some of you might not. If you do know me and not from Heroscape, you probably know me from my work with Atomic Mass Games, where I worked on Marvel Crisis Protocol and was
So for those of you
Star Wars Shatterpoint.
watching,
Keep it
that was weird.
Like Alex.
For those of you
I
watching,
already knew those things about you, but
Dylan's
thought we'd hear
shirt
it again.
is freaking
Also,
awesome.
it's weird that we never crossed
It's a hex
paths
shirt
during
with
our
woo
time
markers for the
at
buttons.
Asmodee and Atomic Mass Games. Maybe they're
And,
just afraid to have us work together. I
he
don't
actually
know.
wore
But
that
I'm
at
glad we
Gen
work
Con.
together now.
And I got to see it while I was there.
No.
I got a picture
Yeah,
of
knew
it.
it would be trouble.
It's freaking sweet. They
Probably.
really ought to
So,
really ought to
Dylan,
provide that as
your
a
turn. Tell us a bit about
something
your
for us
journey
all to buy.
and
That'd
your
be
work
sweet.
with Renegade Game Studios.
Yeah, hey, I'm Dylan. I have been playing Heroscape since Maladon's Prophecy, so almost with Heroscape with this lovely team, so stoked.
I'm also stoked
Okay.
to have you on board. You've been such a great addition to the team. And I guess now we're going to get started on questions. We'll start with Alex. Can you walk us through the development process for an army expansion in Heroscape from concept to final playtesting?
Yeah, that's a great question because there is a lot.
This
that
will
goes
be
into
telling-
this from the
this will be
development
telling
side
how
and
he
also,
answers
as
this.
you know, from the production side. But from the development side of things, we start with an idea. We start with a concept. And the beautiful thing about Heroscape is that the world is your oyster when it comes to this game, because if you can dream it, you can make it. And so, in contrast to a game that is sort of IP forward, like Star Wars game or Power Rangers game or something like that, this is a game where you can really, as a developer, let your imagination run wild. So, just to give you an example, since I'm in Revenant's Caves here, we'll talk a little bit about an upcoming unit, the Revenant Acolytes. So Rowan had an awesome idea for this unit.
Let's go.
These are followers of Revna who have pledged themselves to Revna, body and soul. In life, in death,
Common Squad.
they live, they die, they live again, and they're really her most sort of fanatical followers. So we needed to take that idea, that aesthetic, and that concept and turn it into a playable unit on the tabletop. So we knew we wanted to have support abilities. We knew that we wanted it to involve some sort of Revenant hero worship in game terms. So the first thing that we do is we map out that initial design, those initial abilities. Then we have a period of internal playtesting that lasts for about a month, where we sort of kick the design around internally. We play with each other. This is the stage in development where we also bring in contractors from the old school Heroscape community. The designers, two of the designers on Age of Annihilation, in fact, Don Zimmerman and Adam Tarr,
Okay.
have a chance to look at these designs and work on them as well. After
That's
that,
awesome.
the designs go to Craig Van Ness, who old school Heroscape heads will know is one of the very first designers of the original game system. He weighs into it, and then it goes to an external game testing stage where we have members of the community, basically a curated
So this is
collection of
huge. Craig Van
enthusiastic
Ness
people
is
from all
still involved.
walks of Heroscape, from your sort of casual dining room table
This is
players all the way up to your top tier competitive players. And then, and they analyze our designs, and it's an iterative process. So basically on a weekly or a bi-weekly cadence, we are taking that feedback, taking that experience, making changes, making tweaks, and ideally, moving towards a more perfect unit at the end of the day. So with the Acolytes, we had some ideas for how a resurrection mechanic would work and how they would relate to Revenant heroes. And at first that involved a lot of D20 rolling and trying to get your Acolytes back. But by the end of the playtesting process, it had been simplified and distilled down to resurrecting a single Acolyte anywhere adjacent to a Revenant hero at the start of your round. And when they are adjacent to a Revenant hero, they provide a reroll to both attack and defense dice. So they are supporting their the heroes that they worship, and
That's pretty
that is
cool.
reflected both in the lore and on the tabletop. So that's just one aspect of it, because of course, and I'll hand it back over to you, Lee. There's the whole production, art, sculpting, manufacturing, product side of things too, which is a
That's
whole
pretty cool.
art form unto itself.
Resurrection
Oh my goodness,
next to a hero. I
there's
like that.
so much.
It's
So
kind of like
with just game
Skills and
development
Savannah
in
Lynchia.
general, like you said, that's just one side of it. Like there's the production, there's
That's cool.
marketing, there's keeping everything on schedule and within budget. Like that's all huge. And like I'm just thinking back to the Revenant Acolytes, like when we were working with the sculptor, providing feedback, and the several rounds we went through with the sculpts, and then when we're figuring out colors for the painted version and stuff like that. And that's just I'm going to call it the pre-production side of it. The production side of it, we're just getting started. So I believe in next week, maybe the week after, I'll get to see some 3D prints of them. So very excited.
Cool.
To see them. Well, I think that brings us to our next question. This will be for you, Rowan. How do you balance thematic elements with mechanics to create a functional yet immersive tabletop experience?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. And I like that you use the word balance in the question because it is sort of a give and a take, a back and a forth. There's no one thing that always steers a design or always takes priority over the other. At the end of the day, a fun figure is understandable, and that makes its mechanics shine, and its mechanics shine, which makes it understandable. So it sort of feeds into itself in that loop. So as Alex just mentioned, sometimes a figure
that was a little
has
confusing.
a place in the world, and that sort of narrows the design space for the mechanics. An acolyte of Revna is likely to play off of Revna's themes. We want it to show off who Revna is, so it's going to have, resurrection-style abilities, or in the case of the acolytes, if they're worshipping the heroes, it sort of gives you this impression that perhaps there's a hierarchy inside of Revna's camps. Some information you can glean off of the card and how it works on the table, and these things sort of feed back and forth. We didn't have necessarily 100% of how these figures fit into the world ready at the beginning. Sometimes as we iterated on the design, new pieces of information would pop up and we would say, oh, that's how they fit into the story. That's it. That's how it works. And that is how sort of a new figure that didn't exist before comes into being. We look for something that needs to be filled in either the gameplay, the world, and ideally both, and see how we can push those two things together. There's something we want to expand upon.
I need Dylan's mug. Did you see that D20 mug?
How does that narrow the design
awesome.
space until there's only one thing that this thing can be? That's what we're going to make. That's half of it. The other half is sometimes we are making a new version of an existing character, which we've seen several times before. There are a few Raylans that have been around by now, and a few Drakes you might have seen in the past. So when we are making a new version of an existing character, that already does that work for us of narrowing their scope because we know who they are.
True.
We've seen them before, and what we want to do is take somebody who is familiar and push them forward in their life, push them forward in their time zone, and give you something that synergizes with who they are, so that it still feels like Raylan, but say an upcoming Raylan is perhaps very angry about some of the things that have recently happened. She might be a little bit vengeful about certain
interesting
flame-related Kiri or something like that. So you want to find a way to bring that.
She's alluding to Raylan 4.0,
like
which we
said,
have
also
confirmed.
Physical design,
There will be a Raylan
these things
4.0
reinforce
next
each
year
other, so
during Gen Con. She'll be the promotional figure for Gen
It's not just
Con.
about the name of an ability. Vengeful, there, done. No, of course not. You want to have the mechanics on how she plays follow through with that. So what makes you vengeful? Well, maybe when something bad happens, you react to it. You know, those sorts of events play out both on her card and then, of course, in the narrative.
I'm curious to see what kind of
themselves,
vengeful
but as many
Raylan
already know,
looks
we
like.
also have monthly scenarios, which are going to expand on the story a lot larger. Those, of course, come with their own mechanics that tell a story, but we'll keep it with that for now. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, the monthly scenarios are.
For sure.
I gotta remember
Well,
I should
like
do
you
those.
said, and Alex sort of alluded
Those would
this,
be good
like,
to play out.
some of our ideas, or sometimes it's just like, it's not to say like, oh, it's easy, but you know, it's not as complicated to nail it from the start as, like, say something that we are going to have next year. No, 2026. It's not 2025 yet. So an exciting 2.0 that we're going to have the beginning of 2026. I'm super excited for. And for that particular hero, it's very easy to nail down the theme. It's very easy to like nail down the gameplay and stuff like that. And then other times, like with the Revenant Acolytes, right? Well, we want them to do this, but how does it work in Heroscape? Is this working? And we continue, like, you'll continue to evolve the design through the development process. And I guess that brings us to our next question. I will bring it over to Dylan. Dylan, can you talk about iteration in game design, and how often do our concepts change from their initial idea to their final version?
Let's hear it, Dylan. What you got?
I like that question. Yeah. I think it's important to look at the two parts of that question separately. In that, what's the role of iteration in game design? Like, very high on the list. Iteration kind of is game design kind of is iteration in a lot of ways. You have an idea for a unit that you want to execute.
I'm really curious what Dylan's Heroscapers.com username is. He said he was part of the customs community.
You play test it, you work on it, you then bring it back, you tweak maybe how an ability operates, what the target threshold is for something, what the various stats are. You put it
Chumo
back out,
Fiji.
you try it again, you play one,
I'll ask
two,
that on the
5
chat,
games with it, see
but
how
it's already
playing,
confirmed. I
get
talked to
other
Lee
people's
at
opinions,
Gen Con.
tweak, iterate, try
They
and
plan
distill
on
it
doing
down to the
flag
best
bears
that it
for
can possibly be.
for Aquila
The other half of that question
and the
is
new
how often
Valkyrie
does the concept
generals.
change during
So,
the
that's
development
still to
process.
come.
And ideally not much. I think the fun part is you come in with a very strong concept, and then the game development process is trying to find the best way to execute that concept. So looking at another squad we've got coming out next year, the Molten Crustaceans are they came in with this very strong concept of they are crabs made of lava, so they should drop lava when they die. Anyone who's familiar with Heroscape knows that that is a dangerous proposition. Lava is a very powerful terrain type, but it's such a strong concept that through that long process of iteration and playtesting and development, we whittled it down to the version that makes the most sense and is both fun and balanced. So, does it work to have it be molten lava all the time? No, obviously not. Does it work to have it just be roll, and if you roll high enough, drop molten lava? What's the right threshold for that where it feels both fun and rewarding for the player, but not oppressive for the other player? If it's high enough to be not oppressive, is it then rare enough to be not fun? Is there something we can do on the times where they don't roll molten lava? What about lava field? Oh, but that adds height, but that could be fun. And that sort of iterative process where you end up with a unit that when it dies, it usually drops lava field and sometimes drops molten lava, then you get a really fun unit that is just a delight to play. So that's the sort of way that process works, all
Interesting.
to serve the concept more so than
Lava crabs that change the
concept.
terrain on the battlefield. That's interesting.
Well, it's
So they drop
I would say
molten.
it's definitely a challenge.
So it sounds like
and
their
actually,
current iteration is it drops molten
speaking of
lava
challenges,
or
Alex, what are
terrain
some
lava.
pitfalls in game design that frequently happen,
Hmm.
and how do you
Interesting.
avoid them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there are obvious, I think at this point sort of known quantities in game design that you want to stay away from. I think one of the most hated mechanics in all of gaming is skip a turn, lose your turn. Obviously, anything that's taking agency away from players or causing players to not be able to play the game is a huge problem. That's probably the number one pitfall. But I think there are pitfalls as well when it comes to developing for a game with an existing structure, rule set, history, batch of units, that kind of thing as well. Because you have to be careful to integrate your new designs with the old stuff in a holistic
Yeah.
context, right?
Good
We
point.
all live in a context, as
Good
the
point.
meme goes. And it's important to understand that Heroscape's been around for a very long time. It is a beloved game. It's a beloved world, and that is a world that has been developed, iterated on, designed by so many different people at this point, and has the torch has been carried by the community. So you've got all of these different kind of eras of Heroscape that all need to work together, because of course we want everything that we do to be backwards compatible. We want things from the past to be forward compatible with new units. We want those synergies to coexist. So I think one of the pitfalls that we're trying to avoid is to create new things that don't, that don't work with the old things, or that obsolete things,
it's
or
important.
that just don't feel right given what the game of Heroscape is, and
That's an important
should
distinction.
be. So
Yep.
that's probably the biggest thing that I think it's important when you're kind of given stewardship of a game with history like this. It's important to honor everything that's come before with what you're trying to do and bring it into the future. That doesn't mean you can't have new ideas or new innovations, but you have to kind of respect the groundwork and the foundations that have already been laid.
Well, for sure. Like, we don't want to break the game that we all love and enjoy. So, and I guess
Exactly.
Well, this brings us to my next question, and it's for Dylan. What are some misconceptions about game design that you often come across?
Misconceptions about game design. One of the ones that I see a lot is people sort of assuming game design exists in a vacuum, in a sense, where you have an idea for a unit, and then you can just make that unit. That's a thing. It's just putting stats on some paper. What else could it need to be? And obviously, I'm exaggerating, but there's so much that goes into it, from the process that we've talked about already, with all the many stages of iterative design and playtesting and so much feedback that goes into it, but also production considerations and pricing considerations and things like, maybe it wouldn't be possible to do a squad of 5 peanut-based figures because that would be like 8 molds and or more and be unfeasible, or things like that, where it's like, something to think about that needs to go. That, and just the timeline that things operate on. My calendar is like wrapping up 2025, designing 2026 right now, and that's a fast pace. So it's everything takes a while because there's a lot of artistry that goes into making a game, from our side of things, from Lee's side of things, from the graphic designer,
he's accurate. I've been part of the C3V for several years now. Takes a lot
the other part of it
to get those designs out,
coming from
not just playtesting.
Community.
It's true.
A lot of that is making rules to fit something that already exists, using figures that you can get off the shelf that were made for something else, which has its own restrictions in that you're stuck with a sandbox that's very restricted in terms of how the game is and what's available, but is unrestrictive in the sense that you don't have to deal with all of the other things that I've just mentioned. So that shift in thinking from someone making customs to someone making a living game is tricky, but very empowering for what you can actually bring to the game and actually move it forward into a new era, which is
I'm still curious what his name is on the Heroscape.
For sure. Well, and like for me, like what comes to mind, because I feel like this is what I am, like literally what comes to mind is the conspiracy board with all the strings. And that is just making a game in general. So like you have all your cards of your murder suspects, but they aren't your murder suspects. It's all of us and how we're involved, and then not to be like, I'm in the middle and I'm all the string, but it's like, it's literally like I'm working with y'all, I'm working with Dan, I'm working with Scott, I'm working with Jordan.
What they ought to do is they ought to do
I'm working with Andy from like
community designer like features, or
our web store. Like there's just
community
so
designs,
much
like feature community designs, or what am I trying to say?
So
like bring on a community member.
What's awesome about Heroscape
and like have them participate in part of the design process,
accessible,
and that would be really
especially
cool.
like to newcomers. So it's like, yes, we have basic game, which a lot of us don't play, and because we want the meat of the game, we want all the like the special powers and abilities and the synergies and all that stuff. So when we have some titles like the Battle for the Wellspring Battle Box, which that's for us, that's our game that we have for newcomers. Like, I would like to ask Rowan, what do you keep in mind when you're designing a game that's welcoming for new players, but yet you still keep it engaging for veterans?
Sure.
That's a loaded question.
You mentioned the pinboard.
There's been a lot of controversy
around
around
a lot of complexity to a living army building war game like Heroscape that can be exceptionally overwhelming for somebody just thrown. If your very first experience is, I've never played before, but before I even get the chance to play, I have to try to figure out what might be good so that I can build something that's in any way viable before I even start to actually play the game, that can be off-putting for a lot of people, or at the very least, not welcoming because they're not likely to succeed. So they're going to have an unpleasant time after having spent a lot of time trying to do that skill. So, as you remember, Lee, you and I worked on the battle box a lot, which was taking the pin board of the complex game and not removing any pins, right? We're not making a different game, we're not making a smaller game or something, we're not doing that thing where they teach math by lying to you about how math works and then going, okay, we're going to change it back now. No, it's the same game, but we're trying to cover up some of the pins and let you discover them organically as you experience the game. So here's just a few pieces.
Not sure I understand what that means.
You understand? Okay. Great. We're going to move on to another thing. Here's another thing. So sort of removing some of the cognitive load of a new player so they can get straight into experiencing the heart of the game. Like you mentioned, there's basic mode, but basic mode is typically for a different audience. Lots of children do play it, and they play it as a complete game. They're having a complete experience. That's not master game. No, master game is a completely different thing. And when you're breaking down the master game to allow people to have access to it, something that's very helpful is, here are two armies that are balanced. You can have a good time, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry, you just have to learn how to pilot this group of figures. And once you've learned that, maybe you can switch. Now you can pilot, and now you've learned two groups of figures. Now you're sort of into the game. You've learned about your order markers, you've learned about strategy.
That's true. I will say, from a basic standpoint, the battle box
we can teach you about things like, oops, watch your objectives.
Was
not
actually
just
a
about
really
stabbing
good
the guy.
introduction,
Sometimes
kind
you
of
need to
a
get cliffs.
new player introduction
and you
pack.
can, in those ways, sort of titrate up on the complexity of the game until
I do think they did a really good job with the battle box
now
just
you have
for that
access to the
purpose.
game. Now you know how to play all of the different aspects and steps. So, when you're designing something from the ground up, you want to give that sort of titration across the figures that are in the box as well. So there are some figures that are very simple. They're not intimidating. You look at them, you know what they do. And then you can grade it up to some that are more representative of some of the stranger figures in Heroscape. And in that way, you have a sense of what Heroscape as a game is. You're not locked over here in the small portion going, oh, that's all there is. Every character has one little power and no interactions with each other. That would be a lie. That's not true. Lots of characters have lots of complicated things going on, but you can introduce that gently to people. So,
well, for sure, I like to think the battle box was like what the master set was for a lot of us several years ago. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, it's the magical thing that a younger audience is going to gravitate toward and hopefully grow up with, but like, it's to me, like, the battle box is something that's like, well, the master set is awesome, but it can be really intimidating to a new player. So
also costs a lot for new players.
Down, and
so
you don't want to like have it be a starter set, because if you call it a starter
it's hard
set,
to buy
it makes it sound inferior. It makes it sound like we took a lot of things out, or we removed a bunch of abilities and stuff like that. And it's like, well, no, like, you're going to learn how to play Heroscape as you progress through the scenarios, and then after that you take what you like and you combine it with whatever else. So like with Awashia and Kita and Anshu, it's like, cool, they work great with Rockshot from the master set. And then later on in 2025, I didn't talk about them at all today, but in fall we have the Heroes of Arboreus Army expansion, which will contain even more Graham lizards and beasts. So like, you just get to like really pick what you like and combine it, and that's one of the things I really like about Heroscape. And actually, like, speaking of gameplay, what comes to mind is the question of compatibility. So I'm gonna ask Dylan this. So Dylan, how do you approach integrating old and new Heroscape units? do you consider classic Heroscape when designing new army cards?
You better.
Yeah, no, I consider classic Heroscape practically well making breakfast at this point. It's
good.
It's our cereal, Morrows.
I want Maros now. Goodness.
Feed the hive.
Mar-O's. That's funny.
You've almost succeeded in fully distracting me. Thank you. But no, I love classic Heroscape. It's what got me into wargaming, and I want to respect it and pay tribute to it and build on it as we go forward. We're in an interesting position where Heroscape has been out of print for a significant amount of time. So while I love all those classic interactions, a lot of our current players, probably most of our current players, don't have access to that easily. So we want to make the contemporary Heroscape as absolutely awesome as it can be, in and of itself, self-contained. You can just get new stuff and have an incredible time. But one of the best parts of Heroscape are, well, one, the terrain, obviously, but two is the synergy web, which we've talked about. There's not a lot of war games out there where the synergy is entirely cross-factional and weird, where you can have a Roman legion being led by a weird alien mind controller. Like, that's the kind of thing that Heroscape really shines with.
Absolutely.
And so to have this super extensive synergy web built into the game, being able to, like, pluck parts of that out to integrate into new units going forward so that everything new we create refreshes something old is so fun. So, I mean, we've got the Tanuki Tricksters coming up in the spring, which are awesome Vorid ninjas, who are synergizing with Vorids, of course, obviously, because they're cool and new,
Okay.
but also with ninjas, because those have some stuff going on in classic Heroscape and Shiori and modern. So it's this idea of trying to build on what's done before in fun, new, interesting
That's
ways
really cool.
and really refresh old units.
That's really, really cool. They're going to have
There's so much
synergies
more I
with
wanna tell you
ninjas.
about that, but that's,
That'll make the ninjas more
gonna have
relevant.
to live for next Renegade Con.
That's awesome.
More on that in February.
Yeah, that's a good little sneak peek.
Yeah, I think it's end of February. We'll see. What month is it? It's October. But yeah, so it's funny that you bring up like synergy webs and stuff, because to me that's just another string conspiracy board thing, but instead of it being all these conspiracies or it's your murder board or whatever, it's like all these like cool abilities or like options that you have when building your armies. So with that, like there's so many like fun abilities that you can like really focus on. Like in Age of Annihilation, one of my favorites, I mentioned this earlier, is beast bonding. Like I really like that that's more prevalent in Age of Annihilation, because I love sticking on my opponent and, you know, whittling him down. Like I just love it. And then Kita's just going around like boarding glyphs and things like that. Like it's awesome. So this brings me to my next question. It's for Alex. How does player feedback influence the design process, and how do you incorporate it?
Well, I talked a little bit about the process sort of at the beginning of this roundtable, but it's crucial. I mean, for myself, speaking of, conspiracy boards and the synergy web, when I got this job, one of the first things I saw was that classic document of all of those lines going everywhere, and I had two reactions to it. The first reaction was, holy crap, but the second reaction was, this is actually awesome, because there's a depth to this game that I was unaware of, because unlike Rowan and Dylan, I don't have a lot of classic Heroscape experience. I probably played 2, maybe 3 times over the years, just sort of randomly when it was around. So this was all brand new to me, and I had to learn very quickly. But it helps having wonderful people to work with. Dylan's got kind of a Rolodex of classic Heroscape in his head. Rowan's got all these cool scenarios under her belt, and it's just a lot of great experience. So I very, very quickly got up to speed.
It's good to know he's up to speed
that's
now.
the kind of thing that you need to lean on when you're coming into a new game, as someone who does not have existing experience with it. So, I'm fortunate to work with a great team here at Renegade, but also the Heroscape community is great. And part of the iterative design process is trying to understand the whole kind of panoply of players, because there's a myriad of play styles, and there's a myriad of different things that you can get out of Heroscape. I mean, some people are trying to be the best in the world, right? They're trying to rise to the top of the competitive scene and win tournaments and create the most synergistic, powerful, versatile list. Other people are just trying to make the weirdest possible combination of things somewhat viable. 100% the jam of every single player type. But if we're doing our jobs right, there'll be something for everyone in every wave of product, right? There'll be something cool and goofy and fun. There'll be something that opens up really, crucial new competitive strategies. And there'll just be like cool wow factor stuff that is available to anyone who is just more casually interested in the game, to be like, oh, here's a big awesome thing that just does cool stuff. And I'm excited about how it looks. I'm excited to put it on the table. It's going to be a good time. So, the challenge is everything that we do, we're trying to have it be, balanced, fun, interesting, innovative, and we're trying to also, prevent unfortunate interactions, right? So to go back to the Tanuki Tricksters, for example, for a long time they bonded, or they didn't bond, but they had a movement ability that impacted tricky figures and Vorids. And one of the things that we learned through playtesting, and especially through our players talking about classic units, is that's a little too broad. There are some very scary, tricky units in classic Heroscape, and so we moved that over to a much more, yeah, exactly.
No more rats.
Speaking of those, Dylan, one of the first games we ever played, you introduced me to that strategy, and I was like, thanks, buddy.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah, welcome aboard. Get Death Reaver.
Yeah,
but no,
that's
it's
good.
It's important to understand that, because that is a thing that you have to think about. You have
That's
to
true.
take
That's
that
good.
into account.
That's good.
Like when I was working on X-Wing First Edition, one of the pilot cards in that edition was so game warping that we had to think about him every single time we did anything. Big Starkletter. He was so he broke the rules of the game so profoundly that he actually became a huge challenge as a developer to work around. And so one of the things that the community is so great at is pointing out those pitfalls and keeping us aware of it and putting it on the table. Like if one of our playtesters thinks, oh, I think this would be really really brutal with X, Y, or Z unit, they can play that game, put it in a report, send it to us. We'll go, we'll think about it. We'll not put it on the table ourselves, and it's a way that we can utilize the collective knowledge and experience of an entire community to avoid some of those problematic interactions.
So what this tells me is these Borgies that I keep pitching will not be like the Death Reavers. So we'll see.
Maybe Death Reaver
But-
Light.
We'll see. Maybe the nip. We'll see. Maybe they just bite people. But yeah, totally. Like player feedback really helps refine the designs, especially during playtesting. And actually, my next question is going to be for Rowan. What strategies do you use to ensure a game stays both engaging and replayable over time?
Sure. So, obviously, a living game is inherently has a bit of a leg up in this department, in that new content will be coming out for it on a regular basis. It's living. So every time you release new content, wahoo, there's something new to do. But not just leaning on that, assuming perhaps a master set or something was going to be a standalone, what do we do to make sure that pieces that already exist remain interesting and offer replayability going forward? So we don't want people to have to always buy new content to get fun new experiences. We want you to have buckets and loads of fun out of just a few boxes of Heroscape, your favorite armies.
I mean, yes and no. You're a
So
business.
one thing we do
You
to
definitely want us
ensure
all to continue to
that
buy
that's
your
an
product.
option for you is to give each figure multiple ways it can be deployed. So even if there is an optimal way, if you played a lot of Heroscape, there's some enjoyment in finding, well, like someone mentioned earlier, sure, there's an optimal way to deploy a figure, but is there a strange way to deploy a figure? Is there some bizarre combination that you can use? And we try to make sure that those do exist intentionally when we're making new figures, so that there are things to discover and find with just the pieces you already have. Playing them over and over again, part of replayability is there something to experience that cannot be gotten out of just one play? Yes. You can't possibly have played every faction when you play just one army. Not in the way that they want to be played. You could technically, as Alex mentioned, put one of every type of thing into an army, probably. But
Not
you're
sure what she
missing
means
out
by
on the
that.
synergies and the webs and all of that.
You
So
can
as
play.
you play through different options, you get different experiences. As you play through the same option but with new secondary options, tricksters might be best with a ninja or a tanuki. Of course, they're good with tanukis. They are technically or Vorid.
Other fuzzy critters that aren't
There
bears.
might be something silly you could do if, say, there were to be pools of molten lava on board. Maybe that's not a very great strategy. Maybe it doesn't work out for you very often. But it's fun to try, right? It's fun to try.
Pools
and
of
those
lava?
ways bring you coming back to the game and playing with the same pieces
Okay.
in new ways.
So like kicking or dropping people into lava,
We
maybe?
also
Huh.
have,
Jumping
as
over
a game
lava? I
system,
don't know.
more than even just the people on this call are working on this game. We have our entire organized play department. Hello, organized play department. We love you. And they are constantly working on things that give you new options to play the game with new people, in new places, with new stakes, new scenarios and formats and story blurbs to read, and all of these refresh the game and give you new options to play. So all of that together means that even without just buying new pieces, which again will of course bring in new synergies, and as Dylan mentioned, I think pulling back to old characters, all of that is great. But even with just the box you already have, there should be lots of options to go off of. Lots of ways to play.
For sure. Well, and like one of the things that I love about Heroscape, so one of my favorite figures is probably like C tier or whatever, but I love playing with Rocktrot, because with Rocktrot, you just sort of have Rocktrot hanging out, witnessing a bunch of death, controlling your little animal buddies and things like that. But then, if everything falls into place, a lot of death is happening around Rocktrot, then Rocktrot can still, unleash their super powerful attack. And like, to me, that moment is totally worth it. Like, yes, I'm probably going to lose my game, but I enjoyed my experience. Maybe Rocktrot will cost less in the future. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
like...
She's already admitting that
it
Rocktrot
seems
isn't
like
a
that,
good
like,
design.
Just those interactions and experiences, like, that's what
That's funny.
keeps me playing Heroscape. Like, you won't necessarily get those experiences playing other
Rocktrot
war games.
is
some
not,
are,
not
like, you're tactical
great.
and you're planning every move, but like with Heroscape, it's like, it's honestly a lot of it comes down to the dice.
Rocktrot.
Like, are you rolling well, and can you last long
I'm
enough?
trying to remember exactly
or did you
what
become
the stat
fodder for
was.
your
I think it's
opponent?
like 4 life.
So, and unintentionally unleash their rock shot. So, but anyway, on to my next question, and it's gonna be for Alex. How important is collaboration in the design process, and how often do you foster it within the team?
5 life, 4 defense. Yeah.
I mean, it's huge. It's one of the cool
familiars
things
get
about
really
running
good.
actually,
Then it
in
becomes interesting.
contrast to some of the other companies that I've worked for is we are not siloed off into kind of separate teams in the way that we were at, say, FFG. We're kind of looking at everything, right? We're looking at sketches. We're looking at sometimes I wake up in the morning and I see 42 new Slack messages and I get a little bit upset. But the positive side of that is that, like, we do have a sort of a company-wide input into what we're working on. It's not just the developers doing the dev thing. We're also thinking about the sculpts and does a sculpt match the gameplay, and how do we make a little tweak so that it feels more of feels like a better fit?
Yeah, sculpt matching the card and the
art
gameplay is
conveying,
actually huge.
Is someone floating in our artwork that shouldn't be floating because they don't have the flying power? We're able to contribute to that in a lot of ways, and it's very cool. I think it leads to a better product overall. Obviously, I've already talked about how important the community is and how important our contractors are to the process, but the maximum of too many cooks, I think, does not apply to this team because we're all working together and we're all, contributing in different ways. And within the dev team, I happen to have a lot of tabletop wargaming experience, but I had zero Heroscape experience coming into this. So I've been leaning on, Dylan and Rowan in that respect to kind of bring me up to speed. Rowan produces some of the most, out there, interesting, wild designs that I've ever seen. And then Dylan will come in and say, this is cool, but I think maybe this is potentially a little bit problematic, and we'll rein that in a little bit.
I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about.
So it's cool, but at the end of the day, what you have is you have a very synergistic, very collaborative experience, and it's a lot of work, it's a lot of discussion, it's a lot of
Well, it
negotiation.
sounds like Dylan's got some decent experience to help rein in designs. That's good.
I think a really fun and very, very thoroughly reviewed and thoroughly, analyzed army card at the end of the day.
For sure. Well, and I will say, I don't always view every single version of the army cards, when you're routing them throughout the team, and then with our contractors and playtesters and things like that. But it's crazy. It's well, I have so many other things too. But sometimes you're oh, cool, they nailed it. This is only the second or third version, and then then it's I'm not gonna say how many versions, but it's okay, are we gonna nail this down anytime soon? We're getting pretty close to the wire here. So
yeah, some cards come together better than others or quicker than others, but we get there at the end.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So, and actually, I guess, I feel like this brings me to the next question, since it involves design, and it'll be for Rowan. What advice would you offer to someone aspiring to design their first tabletop game?
Ooh, good question. So, I would say that anyone looking to make their first creative endeavor in any field, but we're talking about games, so in games, should become as well versed in their field as they can. So dig in and play games. Play a lot of games. Play different games.
Man, why are we talking about
game, don't just
designing our own tabletop game?
Play some party games. Play some RPGs.
That's an interesting question.
Something that you're not even sure what the genre is.
We're talking about Heroscape design table. I'm not sure why we're talking about generic.
And don't just play them. And go,
create
wow,
our
that
own
was fun.
our
I've done my
tabletop
job.
games.
Rowan says I'm ready to go. No, play it critically. Think about what it is that you do and don't like, because you're going to learn just as much from both of those. What is it that didn't work for you? And then the layer beyond that is why. Why? If you can figure out why.
I don't know why we're talking about generic
ready to go
tabletop
and
game
start
design.
working on your own
That's
things,
weird.
You know what you like, you know what you don't like, and you know why. So you're ready to start trying to work on your own design. And I highly encourage you to just
The
make
Rod Father.
something that you
Enjoy
like.
dinner.
Don't try to
Take
make
care,
the
my man.
smartest thing anyone has ever made. Don't try to revolutionize the industry with your very first game. Do that eventually. Sure, please. I want to see it. I
Or
want to
just
see the
stick to
coolest game
Heroscape,
that's ever been
because we
made.
already
Do make it.
revolutionized the
But
tabletop
I don't
gaming
recommend
space.
trying that for your first game. If it's recognizable, if it's using some mechanics you just learned from playing some other games, that's fine. Did you have fun? Are you having fun when you play it? If you're proud of your work, you had
The
fun,
Rod Father Sky Knight.
then you're going to
Nice.
keep going, and that's what's important.
Glad
Make
you could
another
jump
game
on
after
and
that.
watch.
Make another game. Go back to the playing
Enjoy
game
your
space
evening,
and
my
play
man.
some more. Go watch some movies. Learn from what you can and pull it together. Give yourself a
You were
lot
brought
of
on
things
again,
to
I think, as part of the War Council, right? I think so.
I love that you're talking about other games. I'm gonna put a pin on that for a moment and throw out some questions from chat. So
Pick my questions.
ask Dylan this. Flag bearers. What do we think about them? Are we gonna make them? Are we thinking
I
about
love
them?
flag bearers. I'm a big fan. I would love the chance to make more flag bearers. Also, with Ursine on the table, I would love the chance to make a flag bear.
I
I
know.
really thought you said plague bears, and I was like, that's our thing.
I mean, maybe for Rock. I mean, maybe for Rev. No, I don't know.
Yeah, a plague bear.
Plague bears.
Just a bunch of
The
plague
undead
bears.
version of Frost Claws.
Oh, bears with their little masks.
We probably can't put 12 Valkyrie dice in that product for the original price, but the concept
No.
of Flag Bear
Oh my gosh, no.
is very cool.
That is one of my favorite Alex moments, is giving him a knight's army and having him read through the card and be, okay, so and then you roll 12 Valkyrie dice? I'm like, yeah.
That's like, this doesn't need to be this many dice. Mathematically, there's no reason for this. I guess theoretically your ceiling is 12, which is kind of cool. But
It feels really great. It's the perfect number for using both hands to roll your dice. It's 12. It's not 10. It's not 8. 16's way too many, especially if you got little kid hands. Like, yeah. So,
Scientifically proven.
yeah, science. Yeah,
Trevor
lots of
Brock
research and
asked a good
experiences.
question on the chat about if terrain will be included for
Let's
figures
see.
that use them.
I'm gonna throw
Historically,
one more
they have,
question.
so I would expect them
Will
to.
we see any updated squads? So, like, there's 2.0. So, like, we've got Len 2.0, Raylan 3.0, and 4.0 next year.
a lot of Raylins.
Yeah, she's busy. She's a busy girl. What about squads? Will there be any 2.0 squads? Or any fun abilities or synergies that are missing from squads that we'll see return? I'm gonna ask that. Oh.
Oh no, so
No, it's not going to happen. Really, though, I think the answer is, in the grand scheme of Heroscape, probably. This is a game that's going to go on a long time. We're going to have lots of stuff come back.
Yeah,
Now,
in the chat,
there
Sour
were
Cream
some
says,
questions hidden in
I'd like
that
to see
question that was,
2 HP
are there
Zedian
going to
guards.
be
Oh, yeah.
2.0s of squads, and are abilities from
That'd be cool.
old
There-
squads going to come back?
There was a lot, and then I added a little bit in there, so then that way it'd be more than just
Keep me on my toes, Lee. But to the second part of the question, yes, there definitely are going to be returns of mechanics from Classic Skate, because as Dylan alluded to earlier, there are a lot of abilities that people buying modern Skate who don't want to shell out a exorbitant amount of money for old figures don't have access to. So we want to bring those into the game in a way that is not, we're not just going to reprint exactly the card exactly the way it was, is what I'm trying to say. Is we're going to
Interesting.
bring those abilities back in fresh and new ways that let you utilize some of those classic mechanics, but on somebody new. Somebody cool that's also doing
Interesting.
something you haven't exactly seen before. So
That's new.
get ready.
That's new.
Look for the return of old squads. Look for something that fills a similar niche in a new and exciting way. Not reprinting green scales, but maybe something that fills a similar niche. That kind of way.
that
yeah, I
or
think
maybe
the
like Dragon.
advantage to maybe the advantage to
Maybe,
that is that
baby.
you're not just sort of obsoleting older units, right? You're creating something with a similar niche. You're creating something that's new and exciting, and gives every player a reason to want to go out and get it, including classic players. But they're going to have maybe a similar play style. They're going to maybe have similar synergies. And the other benefit is that, to use green scales as an example, maybe the new unit lets you run both green scales and the new unit and dragons, and it all kind of works together instead of just being, sort of a reprint of an old thing. That being said, nothing is completely off the table. Like I could see a world in which certain, historical units or something like that got an update or a refresh or something like that. But there's also a world in which we just go to that, to that planet and we accelerate the timeline. And so we get to see, what are Gruts doing 1,000 years later, right? Like how has their technology evolved, et cetera, et cetera. So
That's interesting.
because it's the battle of all time and all dimension, all possible planets. You don't have to restrict yourself to just
Come on, buffering. Renegade.
primitive gruts. You can get gruts from all eras. You can get ninjas from the future. You can get basically whatever you could possibly imagine
Ninja gruts.
can exist in this game, which is very cool.
Maybe.
Who knows? Maybe we'll see one riding a dinosaur. Anyway, next question. Back to the thing I put the pin in.
We need grunt war mammoths.
So, well, just Heroscape in general, Heroscape and some other games, which I'll mention shortly. So Heroscape is one of the games that sparked my passion for tabletop games. Because initially I was like, oh, Monopoly, that's it, boo. I mean, whatever. Unless you have Powerpuff or Monopoly, like that.
Yeah,
that
Monopoly
version's great. Just
takes a whole
based
day to
on
play.
Aesthetic alone, visual aesthetic. Anything else, meh. But so Heroscape is one of the few games I was just like, oh, there's more to games. This is awesome. So that and Samurai Swords, which later became Yakuza, both of which are out of print, but they're awesome. Arkham Horror, mainly second edition, third edition fills the need, but second edition was where it was at for me with Arkham Horror. But that just spark and joy that I got led me to pursue a career in this industry. So what I would like to do is ask y'all, which tabletop themes or designers have had the biggest impact on you? And
Dang, they're really filling the full hour.
I will start with Dylan.
Wow.
Okay, I will try and narrow this list down for y'all, or else we'll be here until the end of the next stream.
Yeah, I was going to say, they're already...
Heroscape is what launched me into war games back in the day. It kickstarted me right forward, and I've been loving it ever since. I play a lot of Gloomhaven and Frosthaven weekly with a group that's been going since it launched.
That's cool.
So if I'm not thinking in 3-dimensional hexes, I'm probably thinking in 2-dimensional hexes. I play a lot of RPGs, a lot of more narrative-focused RPGs. I'm a theater of the mind type DM,
Nice,
more
very
so
cool.
than a crunch DM. Shout out to James D'Amato of the One Shot Podcast and the Ultimate RPG Guides for great DM advice. And then, my board game design professor from way back in college who told me that I should be doing this professionally. Good on you, I am. Nice.
That's cool.
And
Yay!
the game that I have the most hours in, probably aside from Heroscape at this point, I've never measured, is X-Wing the Miniatures game. Especially second edition is such a great distillation of that space fighter fantasy on a tabletop. I've played thousands and thousands of hours of that. So I guess shout out to Frank and Max and Alex, who I now get to work with, which was a little mini freak out when I found that out about 6 months ago. So that's the very short list of
Cool.
the very long list of games that have influenced my whole thing.
It's awesome, and then probably also weird, because I worked on X-Wing. Alex has obviously worked on X-Wing. You played a ton of X-Wing, and then Rowan maybe touched it a little bit from their time with Atomic Mass.
We're credited on some of the same X-Wing products, Rowan and I.
Yeah, so it's funny that X-Wing has touched us all, and then we all get to work on Heroscape together. So it's awesome that we all get to come together and work on this game that we all find so precious. So next up, Alex, what about you? Games and game designers.
Yeah, well, I think my first taste of a world beyond Monopoly and Stratego and whatnot was
Stratego, that's...
Magic the Gathering. I mean,
That's an old one. Yeah, I like Stratego.
Me being 10 years old and moving from San Diego to Fargo, North Dakota, and experiencing negative 30-degree temperature and being snowed in all winter. So you got to find something to do, right? I think that's why there's so many good game designers from the Midwest.
That's probably why FFG's in Minnesota.
Yeah, that's a good point. He makes a good point.
So, but that was an incredible experience. I got into Magic during Ice Age, Fallen Empires, that very old school. Not quite. I wish I'd gotten into it 2 years earlier and kept those cards, but obviously that didn't happen. So
No Black Lotus.
beyond that, no, none of the really valuable stuff, because like I was buying the overprinted stuff because they printed too few and then they printed way too much, and that's where I got in. But nevertheless, amazing experience. Really opened my eyes to a whole bunch of new stuff. And from a tabletop wargaming perspective, weirdly enough, I latched onto Chronopia and Warzone, which maybe some of you remember.
Whammies in the
from
building.
mid-90s
Chad's on
D20
YouTube.
system, competitor to Games Workshops, Warhammer
Templars
and
riding
40K.
Griffins. That would be sick.
But that was my first real tabletop wargaming.
Kind of
experience.
like
I loved it. Like it was true line of sight. It was
what's
I was getting mugs, and
the
books,
Griffin
and
Warriors
random
from Warcraft
detritus
3,
from around
right?
the house to create the battlefield.
The
with
human
blocks
Griffin
and,
Warriors,
that kind
that'd
of
be
thing.
sick.
Got into the Games Workshop side of things in college.
Brandon Foster, that's he made that custom.
Did that
I talked to him at
for
Gen
a
Con,
while,
he was
the
wearing it
battles, I
there.
think is
It's
great.
not anywhere
On
commercially.
the more modern minis side of things, like I just learned a ton working on X-Wing, and James Niffen taught me a bunch. Corey, all the all the folks that worked on that game. I came in, I want to say like wave 3 or 4 of that, so fairly early on, but not right at the beginning, and just learned so much, under James and learning that system. And then, I still play a ton of minis games. I play a lot of Infinity. I got to try Marvel Crisis Protocol for the first time a few days ago, and I liked it quite a bit. So shout out to Rowan for working on that system. But yeah, I really gravitate towards that sort of head-to-head experience. So in the board game world, Sankey Kamara is one of my absolute favorite games. It's such a genius little bit of
He's
design.
got that kind of competitive
From the same
one-on-one
studio.
experience.
Twilight Struggle is fantastic. Chess is a brilliant game. I could go on. Radlands. Radlands is a wonderful, complete.
The fact that he loves chess is good. Heroscape's a lot like a chess game in many ways.
I'll stop because I could just continue, but that should give you an idea of what.
I know. I could turn my screen around and be like, "This is what influences me," but.
Well, I never set out to be in game design, right? So apparently I was doing research my whole life just by being super into games, because I kind of, story for another time, but this was never like my vision for my career. I'm super glad I'm here, but yeah, apparently I was working towards this inadvertently and without knowing it for quite a few years.
Well, it's so funny you say that, because I'm pretty sure Frank was a chemical engineer at some point.
Yep.
So,
yeah, he worked for 3M, I think.
Yeah, and I was a chemical engineering major at one point. So
wow,
yeah.
Funny.
Chemical
look
engineer
I am now.
major.
So yeah, but
What chemicals do you? Now you just sit around. And
now I take those
Lucas
chemicals
Hedke.
and turn them into games.
Dylan
and
seems
then
to
we
be the
get
most
play with
competent
them all
game
the
designer
time.
on the team. He shows that he understands OGscape and how they can
chemistry's
introduce
still
new material
involved. I
without
mean,
throwing
there's
out the old IP.
plastics engineering.
Yeah, he
and,
is. He is the most
There's
experienced for
different kinds
sure.
of plastics. Yeah, absolutely.
I would say Alex
why is this a
Davey
terrible paint
will
color
be
choice?
eventually.
Yeah. So
Alex
not just based
Davey
on visual
is an
appeal, but
incredible
also
designer that comes from the
coverage.
X-Wing
Yeah,
community, and a
there's
lot of the community
chemistry still
members
comes
that
into play.
know him from the
But,
X-Wing community
Rowan, how about you?
said
Game
that he
designer
saved
team,
X-Wing
what's
with the way that he
influenced
designed there.
Oh,
So
boy.
I think it's just a matter of getting
I almost
Alex
wish I knew
up to
exactly
speed on the
what Dylan and
units
Alex were gonna
and
say, 'cause
knowing
now
how to
all
play
I'm
Heroscape.
thinking about is, oh man,
And,
those are some good
I think
games, we
he'll-
should play those.
I think he'll be amazing.
So,
So.
unlike perhaps several of you, I had the weird fortune of my parents being hobby board gamers. So I've been playing hobby board games since I was able to comprehend how a game worked, which shockingly happens fairly early in life if everyone around you is playing cool games and you want to play games.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I've
you
got
know,
my son,
I
he's
remember playing
8 years
past
old, and
games
he's
all the
playing
time,
Heroscape,
which
coming to
was like the
tournaments with me
first-
now, so.
First time I was like, I remember thinking really
Yeah.
hard about what's the smart thing to do, and then pushing my luck anyway, as Dylan and Alex go from playtesting with me. Let's see, there's a game I only remember is Colorful Camels, so we'll let the chat try to figure out what that game is.
Colorful
Camels.
Camels.
The only one I can think of is Camel Up, but I have not played that one.
The game's not
I've
old
heard-
enough. Colorful Camels. moving forward on Portable Camels. And I think 1313 Dead End Drive. Maybe it's just 13.
No, it's 1313 at Dead End Drive. I still own it.
Yeah, see,
Yeah,
that
that's
game was very formative for
Yep.
me. So those are the three I remember playing with my parents all the time as a child. And then flashing forward, in college, I actually did set out to be here and succeeded. So take my advice, everyone, from earlier when you asked about making videos. Eat your Wheaties and don't give up. You can do it. You can also go to college for game design. So my game design professors in college directly, obviously influenced me, I think, the most, because I get to talk to them and extract from their brain their own ideologies, steal the bits that I like, and make them my ideology. So thank you to Alex and Dylan who are on this call. Thank you to my friends and colleagues from Atomic Mass Games with whom I work. And thank you to my wife who makes RPGs and is one of the smartest and coolest RPG people I have ever met, seen, or heard of. Thanks, everybody. And you too, Lee. You're pretty cool.
Thank you. I like to think I'm pretty cool. Yeah, since we're like on
Lee
the
is
topic
pretty
of
cool.
like professors and teachers
He's pretty cool.
at my high school.
Met her at
history
Gen
teacher
Con.
is
Got to meet
probably
everybody
the
at
one
Gen
to
Con,
blame
actually. It was
who
really
got
cool.
me into tabletop games, because he was the one that introduced me to samurai swords. So like we would have these.
Okay,
moments
now
like
they're
after
just
we,
dragging
studied
on.
something,
I'll be
like, okay,
honest.
let's play a game that's themed around this. So that's why I played Samurai Swords. That's why I played Axis and
I
Allies.
appreciate the
And then
backstory,
there
but
was this
now
other
you guys are
game
kinda
that
boring
I
me.
didn't care for, so I don't remember the name of it. But obviously that one didn't
Time to
stick with
time to
me.
close the loop,
But
you
the
guys.
other two
Learn what you
definitely
don't like
have.
too.
Close the
Learn
loop.
what you don't like too.
Bring us back in.
I think
Yeah,
I think what it
everything's
was
a
was
mixtape.
You're
the
starting to
people.
lose people.
I think what it was who I played against. So I was just like, yeah, there's no way I'm defeating them. So I'm done.
Heck, if they keep going on here in the next few
I think
minutes, I
that's-
might just
yeah,
turn it off.
But,
Now they're just talking.
Well, I think that about does it. So I want to say thank you so much for sharing your insights
There we go.
today.
They figured it
And,
out.
Like, I felt like we had an awesome discussion. I hope everyone watching gained some fun and valuable insight into the Heroscape development process. And I think we can all agree that working on Heroscape is a dream job for most of us, maybe all of us. I mean, it is the best game of all time, after all. So that's gonna be a wrap for today. Be sure to tune in later for How to Paint with Roguescaper and the Community Spotlight playthrough with Vecna. So bye, everyone.
Peace. Okay, cool. Well, let's close that off. Yeah, so, well, anyway, I'll just throw that up in the middle there. Yeah, so basically, that's it. I'm not going to say anything really else outside of what was already said. Curry Noodles just got here. Yeah, we've been live for an hour and 16 minutes. You're a little bit late there, my friend, but when I close this down, you can go back and watch it. Basically, there's actually some new information in there, which was really cool. They did talk about some more specifics about the Tanukis, the lava crustaceans, and the acolytes, the Revenant acolytes. So we got a little bit more insight into what they plan on doing there, which was actually pretty cool. I thought that was pretty neat that they provided a little bit more information there. Really good discussion, I think, for the most part. Alex and Dylan, I think, were solid in kind of sharing their Heroscape knowledge, or at least Alex. I've talked to a lot of community members and talked to him a little bit, and basically he's got the experience from saving Star Wars, not Star Wars, X-Wing. Yeah, Star Wars X-Wing, whatever. A lot of community members who are very involved competitively in X-Wing, namely Meg Silver, OEAO, a few others, know him as a game designer, and said that when he came on, when X-Wing was in really bad shape, he actually was able to kind of save the game through his game design and really leading the design team there. So the fact that we got him on the Heroscape team is pretty awesome, pretty incredible. Now it's going to take some time to get him up to speed and understanding and learning the Heroscape game mechanics and system, and understanding the synergies and just the way that different units work together. But at his core, I think he's going to be really awesome. And Dylan seems to have the knowledge that we're looking for in terms of a designer. I would have liked a little bit more clarity or call out to specifically involving community designers and community members in a more official way. I mean, we know that they are contracting out to a couple community members, so they did make that clear. So, I mean, that's good, right? Being able to call that out to community members, specifically contracting a couple of those out is awesome. But I don't know. I think we'll be okay. They have Craig Van Ness involved. They confirmed that. So at a high level, I don't think he's in on the. So he's in at the high level. He's not in on the game design individually at the kind of at the start or at the in the trenches of the nuts and bolts of how the design is. I think he's probably at the top level, seeing the overall design. Does the card look good? Does it make sense? Does the design does it pass the sniff test, right? And no, Sour Cream, we haven't seen the Tanuki Tricksters card yet. It was just a honestly, I think it was just design art concept art during the preview at Gen Con. Sad to hear Alex say that 2 specific contractors were in early design process. More to, I won't name names, but one in particular I don't have respect for. I mean, sure, yeah, that's we all have our opinions. We all have our people that we can work well with and can't work well with. But yeah, there are at least community members that are participating at some level, right? I know that a couple of those community members that are being contracted out are or have been involved in the past with C3V, with the customs community design, which does give me some good what's the word I'm looking for? Not necessarily trust, but like I have more trust in this in the design system of Renegade, knowing that they are still involving some people. It's going to be hard to get over that hump from the initial experience that a lot of us had, and not me specifically. I can't talk to that, but others. It was a pretty rough go around for the first few months when they started involving community members in playtesting, and it soured the pot, I think. But I think overall, doing stuff like this, Designer Roundtable, they're trying to mend that with the community, which is good. So anyway, I'm not going to talk much more. There's not much else to say. It was cool. It was good to kind of poke my head in and kind of listen to what they were talking about and kind of see where their mind's at. If you just got on and need to watch it back, by all means, it'll be up there to watch. And again, if you've already got your own Heroscape, great. If you're planning on buying more out of Age of Annihilation Wave 3, please, by all means, use the Sir Heroscape affiliate link, which is on the screen and will be in the description of this video, to purchase it. I mean, if you're already going to purchase it, please use the link. It'll help support the channel. So thank you guys for watching, and we